Normally I do something like this on Mother's Day. Turn me down just a little bit, Candace. But right now, pastors have a tendency to preach about their life experiences. Last week, I had to do one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, and that's preach my own mother's funeral. Now, I preached my own mother's funeral because that's what she wanted me to do. I'll explain that a little bit later. But my mama was born in a very, very poor situation. They were farmers, okay? But they were sharecrop farmers. I don't know if you know what that means. Some of you do. But a sharecrop farmer, it's not their land. It's somebody else's land. And they're farming it for part of whatever they make out of it. And the rest of it goes to the person that owns the land. You know, they make an agreement of how that's going to work. So my mama grew up very poor when she started out. Mamas are one of the few things that will take a broken family and pull it back together. Peggy, would you walk back there and get my sheets? I left them in the back. But will take a broken family and pull it back together. In the Bible, you see it over and over again, where two brothers would fight and they threaten to kill each other and all that other things that go on in families. But in the end, they would come together to help bury their parents. Saw this with Isaac and Jacob, and it goes on and on. Think about the two nations we currently are dealing with. You have the nation of Israel that came down through Jacob, and then you have the nations that are the Islamic nations that came down through Ishmael. Okay? But what did they do? They came together when their mother died and helped bury her. Let me read you some of the coldest words that you'll ever read. Next slide for me, Candace. Annie Faye McKinnon, 85, passed away after a long battle with Alzheimer's on January 18, 2022 at Ashland Nursing Home. She was born 12/4/36 in Vincent, Alabama. Faye's parents were Albert and Valsey Taylor. She was married to Alan E. McKinnon Sr. for more than 50 years. She's survived by 6 kids, 13 grandkids, and 17 great-grandkids. As far as everybody else in the world knows, that sums up my mom's life. But she was so much more. This is a picture that was taken in 1960. And that little shaved head kid right here, standing behind my papa, that was me. That was my mom and daddy up there. And all my uncles and aunts and cousins and everything else. And that wasn't all of them. That wasn't even the whole family. So I come from a very big family. My daddy and mom had 6 kids. Daddy looked at mama after the great-grandkids. First of the great-grandkids were born, and they all got together, and my dad turns around and looks at mom and says, "See what you started?" Our final victory, 1 Corinthians 50 through 58. It's going to be a short sermon, because it's only going to encompass these few verses. Now it is said, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I tell you a mystery. How can us, flesh and blood, be one with a holy God? Well, then we go all the way back to the beginning. Once again, we go back to Adam and Eve. They were God's apple of God's eye. He walked in the garden. He did things with them. They spent so much time together until the fall. God worked all of history through to get up to Jesus, to reunite with humanity and make them his best friend again through Jesus Christ. And since then has been the opportunity for all nations to come to God, all peoples of all kinds, because of Jesus Christ. But still, we can't walk with God. We could not right now stand in the presence of God. It says to look on the face of God is to die. By the way, there was a just a historical thing that popped in my mind. One of the men of God asked God, "Can I see you?" And God says, "Sorry, you can't see me, because if you see me, you're going to die. But I'll tell you what to do. I'm going to put my hand over you, and I'm going to walk by the mountain that I've got you hid in, and as I pass, I'll take my hand away, and you can see me from the back." Isn't that a shame? That the men of God were not even allowed to look on God himself? But there's going to come a time, that is today, for those who have passed to the other side, we will be able to look on the face of God. We will be at his throne. We will be able to praise him face to face. We'll be able to talk to the prophets. We'll be able to talk to Jesus. That's going to happen. But we can't do it in this. We need a body that's worthy of heaven. And that's the mystery. The next one. Okay. There's my mama's pride and joy. 6 of them. All dressed up for Easter Sunday morning. I was about maybe 9 or 10. Okay? Can you tell the difference in the age jump and the time jump? This is the way we dressed in the 60s. This is the way we dressed in the 70s. Okay? So there's us as teenagers. This is probably maybe 3 or 4 months before I go off into the Navy during the war. My mama loved. You see 6. I see 60. Because that does not show the people that flowed in and out of my mama's house. My mama loved. My mama loved the disciples John's term of loving. She didn't care who you were, where you were from, what you looked like, what your backstory was. If you needed, she was there. She took in kids from everywhere. I remember my dad, Chief Petty Officer, sitting there in his khaki chief uniform at the breakfast table, a big breakfast table. And he's sitting there eating, all of a sudden he looks up and he looks over and goes, "Who are you?" "I'm Sally." "What's your story?" "My mama threw me out." "All right. Who you here with?" "I'm here with Celia." "Okay, there's plenty of food." He went back to eating. That's all my dad would ever say. But my mom would bring them in. And they'd come stay as long as they needed to. And then they would go back out. My wife was one of those. Things weren't going good. My sisters brought her in. They finagled. They worked. And here we are, 40-something years later. I like to mess with people. I says, my wife was my sister before I married her. That messes people up so bad. She was my actual sister, but we called them sisters when they moved in the house and they were living with the family. By the time she came in, though, I was off in the Navy. Me and my older brother both. We shall not all sleep. What does that statement mean? It means that some of us are going to get resurrected. Some of us are going to get raptured. But we shall all be changed. We won't be in this old, rotten body anymore. I like saying that. I look at my toes. I remember what my toes looked like when I was that young age, and I look down at my yellow toes right now, and I say, this body rots away. We don't stay what we were. We slowly degenerate to the end. But here's the magic. In the end, we all get new bodies. And they ain't going to be the old broken ones we got now. These knees that I have that are blown out, they're going to go away. And I'm going to get brand new ones. My old busted up lungs from COVID, I'll get brand new lungs. We will be, as they say, as Jesus was when Jesus was seen by the multitudes after his resurrection. That's the type of body. We will be perfected forever. Why? Because we have to have that so we can be in the presence of a holy God. We have to be perfect because we're going to be in the presence of perfection. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Do you know that somebody has actually studied how long it takes for an eye to twinkle? It's some ridiculous, low number, how long it takes for an eye to twinkle. But almost instantaneously, we're going to go from this old flesh and blood body that has all of its problems to a brand new, perfect body. Let me tell you something. They talk about how fast you can get from one place to another. In your new body, it says we will be like Jesus was. Jesus thought about being somewhere, and he was there. Want to go to Japan? You don't have to get on a plane for over 20-something hours. You'll be able to think about it, and you're there. In the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trump will sound, and the dead will rise incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So those of us that are still alive on this earth, and those that are already in the grave, they will come up together. Another place in there, don't be afraid of those who have already passed away, because they're going to rise up out of the grave as we're caught up. For this corruptible body must put on incorruptibility, incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So to know Jesus is to gain eternity. I don't have to worry about my mom and daddy. I know where they are. I know right where to find them. I know they're just on the other side of the veil called life. People worry about their dying. I don't worry about dying. I know what I've got to go to. I know it's going to be better than what I have here. That's not a problem. I fear the act of dying. Am I going to lay in a bed over a long time over an illness and suffer in pain till I die? Am I going to be hit by a car and die in some tragic way? It's that act that we fear. But death itself is a friend. A friend standing there waiting to open the door to your eternity. It's nothing to be feared. We all fear the act of dying, but we should not fear death itself, because it opens us to our eternity. My mom walked through that door. I say she won. Here's why she won. Here's how you win. She went to sleep, and she woke up in Jesus' arms. If you do that, you won. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then we shall be brought to pass, the saying that was written, death is swallowed up in victory. Satan makes us fear death. He puts out all kinds of things to help us work on our inner insecurities to fear death. He shows us images and on and on. But what I want you to do is look past that thing the devil would have you fear to what wonderful thing that you have coming. Go back one picture for me, Candace. This was the last picture that was taken that had all 6 kids with my mom and daddy just before my daddy passed away. My daddy was the strength of the family. I remember the last thing he said to me. We were sitting in his room just before he went to the hospital for a cancer operation. Oh, by the way, which he successfully went through and would have lived through and lived on for who knows how many more years, except for an accident that happened in the hospital, caused by the hospital. He looked at me and says, we're sitting in his room there in House in Ashland, and he has all the way across the wall this little hanging thing that he sets pictures of. And there's pictures of our family, my grandparents and his family, his grandparents and his family, his grandparents and his family, and his grandparents, going all the way back to John McInnes, who came over here from Scotland, on the wall. And he looks at me and says, let me tell you something, son. He says, I feel when I go in the hospital this time, I won't be coming out. He says, and do you know what that means? Here in a short time, I'm just going to be another picture on this wall. He said, do you know what that means? You're next. You're the next picture on the wall. At 66 years old, I've only got so many more years. And I will be just for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, I will be just a picture on the wall. Go back 2 more. This is my mama's, one of her happy days. This was her first great-grandchild. The oldest of the great-grandchildren, my grandson Seth McInnes. She was so happy on that day when Seth was born. Now I think she's got 17 great-grandchildren, okay, when she passed away. Oh, death, where is your sting? Oh, Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, who has given us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. There is no condemnation for a Christian. Understand that. There is nothing waiting for you at the end of fear. Well, when you get to God, I actually heard this from a non-believer. It says, all you Christians, you shouldn't be so happy if the rapture comes, because Jesus is going to kick your rear. That shows such a lack of understanding of the Bible. There is nothing for us to fear when we get to heaven. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Separation. All the Christians do not go to the great white throne judgment. That won't happen for us. Our fate has already been sealed. We go to a different place. We go to the judgment seat of Jesus Christ. And He is going to review our whole lives. And He is going to take everything that's good, and we will receive blessings and honor and crowns. And He's going to take everything that was bad in our life, and it was going to be burned up. And it's gone. And there's not a punishment. And He's only going to take the good things of your life, and that is where you're going to live, in the state you're going to live in for eternity. We don't have to fear what happens when we die. We have nothing waiting for us but reward. One person says, well, I know this old boy. I know he was saved. I was there when he was saved. I saw the tears and I saw his heart. He says, but 6 months later, he was right back in the bottle and he ended up dying from alcoholism. Is he going to be in heaven, preacher? I asked my pastor. Do you know pastors have pastors? Yeah. I asked my pastor, Tim Cox. I said, Tim, what do you think? I says, I believe he's going to be there. Tim goes, yeah, he's going to be there, but he's going to smell like smoke. Therefore, I love the word therefore. Therefore, because of all I have said here and the promises you've received, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. What you do here on earth, I don't care how much money you make, I don't care how big your house is, how fancy your car is, that does not matter to God. What matters to Him is your fruits of your spirit. It's your love, your charity, your good works. It's what do you do that has eternal significance, that's going to carry you past the grave. That's what He cares about. Go back to that previous picture for me. I showed you the 1960 picture. Yeah, this is her crowd. This is what my daddy said to her, look what you started. This is husbands and wives, sons and daughters, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and here's the funny thing, that ain't all of them. That's not all of them. One whole half of my family couldn't even be there because of COVID. Go to that last slide for me. Matthew 25:21. His Lord, His, that term in the original language was not talking about men, it was talking about humanity. That's all people. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. I did a very, very short sermon for my mama. It probably didn't last 6-7 minutes. The rest of the time, what we did is we took that microphone and I handed it to the first person. And I started out, my favorite, I says, I'll start so you know what we're looking for here. I want you to tell something that's special in your life that happened with Mama. For me, the proudest moment of my mama's life when we were together was when she was sitting on the front row of Mount Signal Baptist Church. And I was sitting right here in a chair in that church, surrounded by pastors. And they poured that oil on my head to anoint me as a preacher of the gospel. Afterwards, she got up, she says, nothing better than could have happened to make me more proud than to have one of my children become a preacher of the Word. That was my favorite moment. And that started it. And I passed that mic around, and the brothers and the sisters and the cousins and the nieces and nephews and the grandchildren. And we spent over 30-something minutes passing that, and we laughed and roared and tears and crying. It was the best time because they could hear the love that Mama had and what she had done. One of the grandkids said, my mama, when she was in her mid-70s, and most people have given it up, Mom took me and Seth, me and Will and Lisa and 3 of the other grandchildren up to Cheehaw Mountain to a lake up there. He says, we got in our bathing suits, we're out splashing in water, and here comes that little red car of Mama's, and she pulled up and went in there and changed into a bathing suit, came out there in the water, splashed and played with us kids for forever, it seemed like, and was diving at 70-something years old, diving under the water, grabbing our legs and pulling us under. Mama loved. And as John said, if I can just teach them to love, it's enough. Just teach them to love one another. My mama loved. The end here on earth is the beginning for a Christian in heaven. This was the last sight that people saw before the dirt went on the coffin. Those roses, the white ones you see, were the brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, laid a white rose in Mama's casket. The cousins and nephews and nieces and grandchildren all picked the colored rose that they felt represent their relationship with Mama. And I want you to see how it's covered. She won. I envy my mother because she is where I want to be. Less than a month and a half ago, I had that opportunity. I was close. I could feel it. I was right there at crossing. God said no. No. You got more to do. You got to stay. I envy my mother. And all Christians are torn down and they're hurting. And this life is beating them down and making them miserable. And they hurt. And they're in anguish. And my answer to them is, you're just here for a short time. You've won already. If you're a Christian, you've already won. You're just waiting your opportunity to cross over. And when you do, when you make that cross, all of this that you went through will be forgotten. Because there's no tears in heaven. There's no pain. There's no aches. There's no surgeries. In heaven, there's no auto accidents. There's no diseases. It says we will be there with the Lord forever. I want to thank you for joining us here at Frontenac Baptist Church in Cocoa, Florida. Whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, I hope you received something out of this message that blessed your heart. Thank you once again for joining us here at Frontenac Baptist Church in Cocoa, Florida.